So in this video, we are going to look at the Indian National Congress. In fact, the road to the beginning of the Indian National Congress. We all know that the Congress was started in 1885, but the Indian National Congress was not the first organization to be organized to discuss the future of the Indian nation. Various associations and organizations preceded the Indian National Congress, but none, including the Indian National Congress, adopted a confrontational stance in the 19th century. Confrontation, even in its mildest form, was only seen to surface with the rise of Balagangadhar Tilak, a man who in the history of India enjoys a place right at the top with Subhash Chandra Bose, Sardar Patel, Rajaji and JP Narayan. Most of the organizations of the 19th century were mostly academic in nature. They were meant for the intelligentsia and were restricted to the upper classes. They indulged in debates, met once or twice a year, but there was not much concrete action. However, newspapers, pamphlets, and books were a great source of nationalist propaganda and education. The nationalist demands were put across to the British administration through these means, and the press was seen to be a weapon of great power. On the surface, the nationalist Indian demands of those years were confined to the following, that is, no reduction of duties on textile imports, no expansion in Afghanistan or Burma, Indianization of the civil services, the right of Indians to join the semi-volunteer corps, the right of Indian judges to try European criminal cases, the appeal to British voters to vote for a party which would heed to the requests of Indians, etc. All of these requests look rather mild, but remember this was in the 19th century, before Balagangadhar Tilak actually came into the picture and said that okay, extremist was also a form of protest. But the truth is, the colonial regime could never have conceded even these innocuous demands, for conceding them would mean erosion of hegemony. The period between 1875 and 1885 saw a transformation in national thought to a certain degree. This was the time when new intellectuals were born, some of whom were more radical than the conservative upper class intellectuals. Radical here is only relative. Radical is within the context of 19th century. Until 1905, all notions of radicalism were confined to boldness either through suggestions in the press or moving resolutions that seemed radical for that particular period. The young nationalists of Bengal in 1876 founded the Indian Association led by Surendranath Banerjee and Anand Mohan Bose. Remember this, the Indian Association was founded by S.N. Banerjee and Anand Mohan Bose. In Madrasapatnam, or what the British called Madras for the lack of elocution skills, the young Veera Raghavacharya, G. Subramanya Iyer, Anand Charlu, and others formed the Madras Mahajan Sabha in 1884. Bombay saw the birth of Bombay Presidency Association in 1885, led by K.T. Telang and the fiery Firoz Shah Mehta. The oldest of these associations that survived and continued into the 20th century was the Pune Sarvajanik Sabha, which was already in the hands of the nationalist leaders. As discussed before, the press was seen as the most potent weapon by these early associations and organizations. Hence, this period between 1875 and 1885 saw the birth of all the major nationalist newspapers which were to dominate the Indian scene till 1918. The newspaper as follows, that is, the Hindu, Tribune, Maharatta, Kesari and Bengali. Amar Bazar Patrika was in existence from before, but it became an English language newspaper only in 1878. The story of the Amar Bazar Patrika is also very amusing. We will narrate it at a later part in this course. The British tried to rein in the Indian press through the Vernacular Press Act, but the Indian press waged a major war against it. The Indian textile industry employed a lot of people, and since 1875, there had been a continuous campaign around cotton import duties which the Indians wanted to stay. Lytton's Afghan adventure was opposed, compelling the British government to contribute towards the cost of the Second Afghan War. The Plantation Labor and Inland Immigration Act of 81-82, which rendered the plantation laborers to serfdom, was opposed and protests were organized. There was great support for the Ilbert Bill of 1883, which would have allowed Indian magistrates to try Europeans. It was ultimately defeated because the Indians never acted in a coordinated manner. The Europeans, on the other hand, were a highly organized group, and their efforts always bore fruits for this reason. This was the backdrop against which the Indian National Congress was to come into being, a culmination of the political work of the previous years. As discussed, a number of issues were being addressed, and hence an agenda had already formed for an organization to take center stage. More importantly, the leaders of different associations realized the need for centralized coordination and action, as that had been their Achilles heel while dealing with the Europeans. While it seems quite easy to explain the success of Congress in retrospect, the leaders who founded the Congress always understood this. The success or failure of Congress and its future character would be determined not merely by its founders, but by the extent to which the above discussed objectives were achieved in its initial years. We will continue looking at the Congress in greater detail in the next video. Thank you.